I am the anti-dichotomy person.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I can explain some of why, but I think we're getting in deep, deep dichotomous trouble in the world.
Welcome, Professor Maury Peiperl, to the first discussion we've had together on a podcast. We've had many discussions over the years, but thanks for joining the Optimal Leadership podcast.
Great to be here.
For the people who are in the audience who don't know you, and I think many will, because you're a eminent professor, having been the dean of George Mason University in the US, of Cranfield Business School. Also in the UK, I know you've been many, many years at London Business School as professor. And of course, as mentioned, where we first met when you were at IMD in Lausanne. And of course, we got to know each other through your work on change management, which was the passion of mine in leadership. And it's really great, Maury, to be having this conversation with you today. It's always good to have a conversation with you, but this one will be shared more publicly. So I'm particularly proud of and excited about that. And especially the topic that we're choosing today for leaders to be able to look through the three related lenses of purpose, context, and behaviors. Such a, especially in these turbulent times, I think to have these three lenses together with the pressures CEOs are under is very, very important. So thanks for your willingness to be here today, Professor Murray, and to talk about this with me.
It's a great pleasure, Wilf. I mean, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you as well. And I love the way that you put the pieces together from your experience as well as from readings, etc. And you do have quite a bit of experience across the globe, which is what I also love. I'm originally a scientist, engineer, and musician, right? So, and I did work in technology, and then I went and did an MBA and worked in strategy consulting. So, but for me, it was all about what's going to be useful. What are we solving, and how can we improve the practice in organizations for individuals, especially for leaders. And I did find actually in my strategy consulting career, which was in Europe. I mean, I'm from the U.S. and went to uni in the U.S., but I got my MBA and I went right to actually to London to work as a strategy consultant. And after a few years, it became clear to me that the biggest issues in these organizations, so the problems to be solved, which is what I care most about, were not so much in strategic analysis. I mean, I had the pleasure of studying strategy with Michael Porter, and had all the credentials. But even Mike is clear, that it is not just about analysis and structure. You have to figure out purpose and impact. And I found that after a few years in consulting, the biggest issues that the client firms had were not strategic analysis. They were organization, leadership, culture, execution, feedback, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually went back to do a PhD. And if you're thinking about doing a PhD, I think it's best that you have experience first. Not everybody does. But that really motivated me to go and study something that if you had told me when I was a kid, playing with circuits and building, bits of what would later be computers. If you told me I was going to study organization psychology, I would have told you were, to use the psychological term, nuts. And so, you do evolve. And in my case, it was evolving by looking at what was going on and what might make a difference, right? It's not that I was particularly good or bad at doing those things. It was just a matter of what's my focus? What is the purpose? How do we be useful? Which is what I really care about. So that is why I ended up doing the PhD in organizational behavior and became a professor of management. Very different from engineering. I had once almost gone to do a doctorate in electrical engineering, but I chose to go into the working world for a while instead. I'm glad I did. I mean, you never know early in your career, or rarely, sorry, what is your eventual path? People like to think, oh, I'm going to plan it all out and I'm just going to do what I plan to do. And that is the big exception. I will tell you, Wilf, and I wonder if your listeners will relate to this. When I ask people to tell me about their careers, and I've done a lot of work studying careers because I'm very interested in those, and so I'll say, well, tell me about your career. And the person will reply, oh, don't ask me. I'm not typical. That is the typical answer.
Yeah.
So if the typical career isn't typical, maybe we need to zoom out a bit from this idea of plan and execute, plan and execute. It's not that it's not important. It's just, it's only a small piece of what actually happens, which brings us to the context part, right? I mean, the purpose on the one hand, context is about, what happens in the wider world. And I must give some credit to that strategy firm that I worked in after business school, because their motto was strategy is what happens, not what is planned to happen. And I thought that was great, right? I mean, we are trying to be real, not just sort of be smart enough to know it all or to tell you, what you need, without thinking about what's actually going to come to pass. And that, it's not that hard to understand, but very often we are trained, that is trained out of us if we are at all a specialist. And most professionals get some sort of specialized training, whatever it is.
There is so much in there, Maury, and you reminded me the first conversation we had was in Boston, and yeah, you did ask me about my career, and true to stereotype, I said it wasn't a typical career, and it hasn't been a typical career at all, and so that seems to be a truth that stands the passage of time. You used the phrase "you never know," and I love that, because one of the things that you're famous for saying is that leaders should be constantly asking the question, "What is it that I don't know?"
Oh, gosh.
And and I was just wondering how that's played out in your career.
Well, I might not be typical because I've always wanted to know everything.
Right.
So there's this hunger, this curiosity for, oh, what's going on? What did I miss? What was the history here? Which we so often ignore or don't go to find out history, which is so important. Um, but no, when I was very young, they ask the kids in primary school, what do you want to be when you grow up? I must have been 10, right? And I said, I kid you not, I said, a Renaissance man. And
Oh,
it,
well.
it must have been because, my parents were very, broad-based thinkers, scientists, but also in my dad's case, science and art and linguist.
Mm.
So, there was this world of things swirling around me. A lot, always great music, typical classical music playing in the house, and things. So I always wanted to find out new things because I'm fascinated by the world, by cultures, by language, by art, etc. And there's a big piece of me that wanted to study music, philosophy, what have you. So, in fact, I know I had decided on engineering, but I chose not to go to MIT, where it's what at that time was very, streamlined, focused, and all the buildings were numbered instead of having names. And I thought, you know what? As great as MIT is, I'm going to go to a broader based university. Ended up at Princeton, where there's a great engineering school. But while I was doing engineering, I took courses in Beethoven and economics and psychology, philosophy, what have you, just a one or two of each of these things, but because I was interested. And so I think I hope I've continued to be like that. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm on some commercial boards, including a small bank, listed bank, but I'm also on the nonprofit boards, an orchestra, an arts and music summer camp that I attended many decades ago. One Princeton related board, one Harvard related board, a couple of things in Europe, and I just I love the breadth, and partly because it's who I am and what I like, partly because it helps in the deeper understanding of what is going on
Mm.
around us in the world, around this industry, that company, that group of people. Most important thing you can learn how to do, I think, Wilf, and I don't think it's just in business, but certainly essential to leadership in business. The most important thing you can learn how to do is to see the world from another person's point of view or another culture's point of view, because this really helps you understand why they do what they do, how they decide, and how that might or might not work with you or your company or your team. And then, of course, you can apply that same big picture principle within your group or your team because everybody's different, even if you have very similar backgrounds. And just understanding. And when I talk about musical thinking, when I have this session that I love to teach with executives called Musical Thinking for Leadership, it is largely about, it's not about, how to play an instrument or how to conduct an orchestra. It is about how to get at the deeper themes, melodies, rhythms, or if you're more visual, images that are going on in people's heads, because they are all the time, to get at what are the unstated thoughts or assumptions, sometimes not just unstated, but un, uh, unaware. We don't know that those things are there, but they are. And if you can tap into just a little bit of it, I think it makes you a better leader because you can help connect, across some common themes, some common views of people. And finding the common ground is always, not always, but just about always an essential role for a leader, whether it's a CEO or a project leader or what have you. So these things come together. And yes, I didn't start out with that clear view. It took me a few lifetimes to get there. But that's the context piece.
Yeah, I mean, you packed enough in for a few lifetimes career-wise in consulting, in being a lifelong learner, but also in being a lifelong teacher, as well as being a practitioner, of course, in many boards, both commercially and in the non-profit sector. As you were speaking, Maury, I was uh, thinking that context is clearly top of mind for you. And I was wondering, with these three themes today that are connected for leaders: behaviors, purpose, and context, if you had to prioritize one in for leadership development, which of the three would you say is the most important for leaders to pay attention to: purpose or behaviors or context?
Do
Or
you remember what
you
I said
might
about?
say it depends on the context.
Professor always responds, "It depends." Um, but you remember what I said earlier about I refuse to divide things into
Right.
twos. I also refuse to divide them into threes.
Okay. Okay.
No,
Fair enough.
look, and I love it because people always say to me, "Oh, you've been to so many places. What's your favorite country? What's your, which is the most important?" Sorry, they're all in there. And in any given situation, you're going to have to zoom in on one of those. But in
Mm.
different situations, so back to context, it might be a different one. So yeah, I suppose in terms of what we most often miss, that is context, right? We
Mm.
see people and behaviors because they're right in front of us, right?
Mm.
Purpose we don't always see, but we tend to think about it, although there are some who rarely do. But particularly whenever there's, dilemmas, what should I do, or what? Often it comes back to, well, what
Right.
purpose, what impact I want, right? But for context, we miss it all the time, and there
Right.
is this wonderful social psychological principle called the fundamental attribution error. Goes back, what, several generations, at least 60 years old. It looks like this, Wilf. So you see a CEO struggling in their role, um, and you are the outside observer, so you're not in the middle of the situation, but you look and you say, "Gosh, you know, is it the individual or is it the situation?" Well, I think it's the individual. I think we need to, get rid of them or something. And
Mm.
as you know, CEOs don't tend to last very long, a few years. And the idea is because you see the person, right? You can get a sense: who are they? What are they doing? What are they not doing? And so
Mm.
it becomes easy to judge
Right.
the individual. What you don't see is the situation. Particularly, I mean, you don't see it usually much at all, although you might see some basic numbers and what have you,
Yeah.
trends. But you don't see it from their point of view, all the different issues going on. And then we make a conclusion, we attribute the failure to the person, to the individual, rather than to the situation. So we take them out and we put somebody else back in. Guess what? Same problem or related problem or other problems or things that you missed because the context, the situation is not visible to the outside observer. The person is visible. We see, we know people. The situation is not. And so we miss this all the time. We call it the fundamental attribution error
Mm.
because we misattribute. Often I'd explain that by starting with, okay, how many of you think, I don't say anything about fundamental error, boom, boom, boom. I just say, here's a person in a situation having trouble. Do you tend to, blame the person or the situation? And most people blame the person. And then I say, do you think the individual blames himself or the
Yeah.
situation? And they say, of course they blame the situation. And I say, yeah, okay, so that's the actor observer divergence, it's called. And we look at it differently, right?
Mm.
Then I
Mm.
say, which one of them is right most of the time? And of course, the observers always think they're right. And guess what? Most of the time, something about the situation is making it impossible. So that's a long winded way of saying context is more important than we realize, which is why it's such a problem because we don't
Yeah.
realize it.
And given that the CEOs or the person often can't change or can't adapt quickly, and some people will thrive better in some contexts than others. I guess it's incumbent on those appointing a leader, a CEO, to have a good understanding as much as they can of what the context is and assessing for likely fit in the context, which itself isn't always easy in a multinational, for example, where those
Exactly.
making the appointment aren't so close either to the context.
Exactly. And when I teach change or global leadership, I always use one or two case studies, which is exactly what you're describing. Here is, the opening, and do you take this person, this person, this person, and here's their background, et cetera. And we argue, the students argue, the executives argue about, why this person should be or the other person should be. And then we get into, right, what are the pieces of this? What are the things that, are most likely to make a difference in the overall impact rather than just, tomorrow. The other thing is people do change, right?
Yeah.
People really do change and they can learn. And if you assume, as so many people do, I saw one friend who wrote this on social media the other day, people don't change. I'm not going to go back and talk to that person anymore. Okay, fine. But you know what? People do change. And if you want to make that choice, it's up to you. But if you want to get a little bit into what might be going on that causes this problem, context and history
Yeah.
before just getting at the individual.
Mm. Yeah. And often it's the situations and the context that give us the opportunity to
Oh,
change.
indeed. Well, as you've experienced, yes, quite
Yeah.
a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, as you're talking, Murray, I'm just thinking about purpose because often, again, leaders start out with let's call it a mission, but at the bigger picture sense, sometimes even a purpose. But often the purpose might itself depend on the context. So what's your view? Should should new leaders, new CEOs, should they swim in the culture for a while, get to know the context before determining what's the purpose, or should purpose come first? Do you have a view on this?
Well, are we talking individuals? Are we talking organizations? I mean,
At
presumably the organ.
organizational purpose. Should CEO leadership team build that around the context, or should they shape the context to fit the purpose? Is are there? Or you might say it depends.
If you have an organization, there's already a purpose. Why was it created in the first place? Okay, that may have evolved, but leaders don't create purpose any more than
Mm,
they create culture.
right.
This is nonsense. And a
Mm,
lot of it belongs to, and now,
yeah.
forgive me, but I actually believe this. A lot of it is driven by what I refer to as testocracy, which is that men, want to have not just an impact. They want to be the ones that make things happen, create
Mm,
the way, and they get credit and all. And you know what?
mm,
If you're in a complex situation and you have to be paying attention to a lot of changing things, balancing across issues, people, etc. On average, the women leaders are going to do a better job than the men leaders because they are less driven to achieve for their own sake.
mm.
It's not that they're not, but I mean, it's a relative thing, which is quite literally to do with that hormone testosterone, scientifically speaking. So if you are, more attuned to the bigger picture and results that aren't about you, then
Mm.
you, yeah, yeah, most important thing you can learn to be able to do is see the world the way the other person sees it. But the second most important thing you can learn is that it's not about you. That is difficult
Mm.
to
Mm.
say to a CEO, because especially a man, because they made it there because it was about them. Not always, thankfully, but there's a lot of that, and you see quite a bit of it today. Um, and so I'm really focused on purpose as bigger picture, longer term purpose. And I say this from experience because I've been involved with a number of organizations and leaders where the purpose is about, next quarter's earnings or next year's share
Mm.
price or my next career step. Again, those things are not unimportant, but those are not the reasons that the organization exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to make sure that when we talk about purpose, we don't see it as a thing that top management creates. It's unless we're talking founder, which may be, and
Yeah.
I was actually at an event last evening here at the Economic Club of Washington D.C., which featured Jeremy Allaire of Circle, and what he's working on. He's been in internet related startups for many years. Was involved in creating Flash. If you go back 20 years on the internet, but there is this purpose of stable coin now, which is about online currency, blockchain related currency that is absolutely balanced by a capital reserve rather than floating all over. And the purpose there is not to make lots of money in crypto. The purpose there is to enable instant electronic payments in places like much of the world where the banking system is severely weighed down by slow processes or overregulation or what have you. And I don't know that his dream is going to be a replacement for banking, but you can see, you listen to him talk and look at the record. There's a clear purpose which is about enabling commerce in lots of places, and de-risking this sort of crypto
Mm.
world, which is full, as we know, of risk. So purpose. Sometimes it just sort of shines, and I've seen many examples where that's the case. And
Mm. Yeah.
bigger bigger picture. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I was reflecting as you were speaking. I've been working recently with 5 founder CEOs and who started their businesses with anything from 10 years ago to 10 months ago. And as you say, purpose is something you can do. You can focus on as a founder. I'd say probably only one of the 5 started with purpose, with
Really?
a really clear kind of reason of why does this company exist, which will withstand the test of time. And so I was thinking, at which point, might life get easier when there is a purpose? And I at the other end of the spectrum, I've worked with businesses that are hundreds of years old, and there would have been a purpose, but I was with a subsidiary where somewhere along the first, like 8 or 9 decades, the purpose had got lost. So we had the opportunity to reinvent a purpose, and that probably was a once in a career opportunity, at least for me. And I was surprised, not having spent a lot of my career thinking that vision, mission, purpose, values, culture were all important, but then having a purpose did give us a North Star.
Yeah,
When we had really tough decisions to make, where we were able to say, well, what would our purpose tell us? And
for
that and
sure.
it was
Yeah.
always instructive. Yeah.
There are many examples of businesses which have been going for quite a while, and who maybe the initial purpose no longer fits, and some of them don't adjust and go out of business, and some of them stick around. I remember, maybe it's a myth, but I did read more than once that the UK created a position, I guess it was military position in 1810 or 1815, to somebody who would stand on the White Cliffs of Dover and look out and sound the alarm when Napoleon and the fleet came over, right? And apparently that job was abolished in 1930 something. So okay, fine, but I was going to ask you. So of these companies, the 4 out of 5, and without naming names, that you feel really didn't start with a purpose, I'm confused. What did they start with?
In some case, it was an idea of a technology that they felt they could bring to market.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Um,
I
in
have a great
some,
thing.
yeah, yeah, and find someone who can buy it,
Yeah,
someone who
yeah,
can use it, and in some cases, the idea was, I'd like to make a lot of money, like to set up a company and sell it, and the thought was less on what's the value it's going to bring
yeah,
to the world.
yeah, yeah. You're
And
right.
then eventually we get into a phase where answering that question might be helpful in making money. If it's going to bring something useful to the world, it's more
Hmm.
likely to do well by doing good.
I mean, or at least do well by being useful.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, is it good? Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I suppose I'm intentionally forgetting that there are those many
yeah,
people for whom
yeah,
it's, I have
yeah.
something brilliant I want to sell because it's brilliant, or I want to have a company so that I can get rich. I keep forgetting that that's most
Yeah.
most startups. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, we can retrofit the narrative sometimes as well. If we're successful, then maybe the purpose can fit backwards. I'm not sure. So purpose was one of the leadership paradigms that I changed my mind on. I went through much of my career deciding it wasn't useful, and then decided it was. Are there any aspects of leadership where you've now got a very different view to what you had maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, Mark?
well, I mean, starting for myself, I think one of the things that happens maybe is we particularly the men, I want to climb the ladder.
Mm.
Um, and I had that. Um, I actually, not to cast aspersions at any of the places that I've worked, but I gave up what probably was certainly the most enjoyable job I ever had, which was at IMD. Why? Because they're so close to so many businesses, or the practice is, really right there. And I gave that up because I had a chance to become a dean. So, move up. And Cranfield was great. It's a wonderful place, but it's not quite as globally connected, as the IMD group, and of course it became harder after Brexit. But I think we do make decisions sometimes based, a lot on moving ahead. Um, and again, I'm wonderful colleagues at Cranfield. I had a great time there. But I must say that IMD and the kind of work I was doing fit me perfectly. But sometimes we change position out of ambition, and often I don't know if that's the right reason. The other thing in terms of how you change your view, it is, do I want to be connecting, developing, and helping others, even if I have no role going forward, even if I have no
Mm.
financial benefit or what have you. And I just find that very rewarding at a purpose level, and I think it usually, it comes back. You benefit from it eventually, and if you don't from a specific case, that doesn't matter. If you help as many people as you can to connect better, to move forward, to learn. And this isn't just about being a teacher, but it's just about being I hope, a good human. You help others to also thrive. And I didn't grow up. I didn't start the first half of my career thinking that, and I really should have. But I think certainly most men, and maybe I don't know. I'm about what it is like from a woman's point of view, but I don't think that's we don't get that earlier in our careers, and many people never get it.
Mm.
So the
Yeah.
question is, are we able to evolve over the course of our leadership careers to be leaders who are more about others? And that also helps them become, as you've written, more hands off. Because
Yes.
if it's not about me, I don't feel like I need to be in there all the time. If I take satisfaction from the progress and success of those around me, or even better, those that I've mentored or developed, but not just those, right? My friends, my colleagues, whatever. It's a wonderful affirmation of just work and knowledge and being human. The connections that we have are the most important contributor to our happiness, the research suggests. And
Yeah.
so, if in fact we are spending most of our time focused on developing and helping others be successful, well, yes, also helping define and focus on, yes, where are we going? Is our purpose evolving? How do we show this? But that, I think, also is a collaborative effort. Anybody that tries to implement, as I said, a purpose or a culture is very likely to fail,
Yeah.
because those things do not come from above. Uh,
Mm.
they they uh, they come from an origin or from a context. In the case of purpose, and they come from ways of working and assumptions. In the case of culture, one great definition of culture is, quote, the way we do things around here,
Mm.
end quote. I mean, that is not what the CEO says. They can, I mean,
Right.
they can influence it, but it's particularly if the CEO, as is happening in many places at the moment, says things that are completely at odds with what the team believe, it's not going to change the culture. You can force changes in behavior, but that does not change culture.
Yeah.
So, that's so behavior. I think behavior is funny because I often think of behavior as outcomes, not
Right.
just as
Yeah.
tools or inputs or what have you. Very interesting. And you're very familiar with a number of the companies in Asia, and you know that we teach. Of course, I think Vlada was involved in this. The case on Jingdao Hire and
Mm.
Hire, very different culture from the rest of the Chinese
Mm.
manufacturing firms going back decades, right? And still, now definitely global leader, right, in appliances, et cetera, et cetera. And it is a lot to do with what is behavior, how do we support it, what, and it is not for everybody. A given company, a given culture, a given purpose, not for everybody. And so there
Mm.
is a certain amount of self-selection as well as, metric-based
Mm.
selection and deselection in these cases.
Mm. What one thought you went through my mind twice as you were speaking, and I think in the context of CEOs' lack of ability to change the way things are done is one of my exits as a CEO after 3.5 years in the role. We had a handover event with our distributors, and our distributors spend many years with the company, many decades, and in fact there was one gentleman at this CEO handover event, was one of our distributors, and he said, Wilf, this is the 13th time I've been to a CEO handover event in the 65 years I've been with this company. And, that was
That's about
just
right.
so
That's five.
powerful. Yeah.
65,
Then,
that's about 5 years. That's pretty good for a CEO,
yeah,
actually. Average
you
of
think,
5 years?
yeah,
Well, it
but
depends what
it's
depends
five
on what.
years is okay as an average maybe, but to him, CEOs are just the folks who are passing through his organization, and
It's
that's
true.
that's how it is. Yeah, and
I
it's
mean, as we all are.
sometimes as we all are over the long term. So it was really quite yeah, quite humbling and quite instructive to see this. So we shouldn't flatter ourselves as CEOs that we're determining the culture. And of course, cultures take quite a lot of effort to change. So it really has to be worth the effort. Yeah, the culture I feel really has to be getting in the way of the strategy in
Yeah.
order to put the effort into changing it. Did you have a view
And
on that?
yeah, and enough of the people need to believe that in order to make it happen.
Right.
These are not things that are commanded or or changed because of the cards, little gold
Yeah.
cards in your wallet. I know one company, who shall remain nameless, where very clearly written what is the culture, what are we about, um, and when you look at actual practice, words of the CEO and the top management team, it's just opposite directions,
Mm.
and those are the things that people see every day. Is what is the leadership asking for, and so that's on the one hand confusing, but
Mm.
then on the other hand, it's very off-putting. You just like, what do I? Not other hand, but I mean, at a deeper level. It just sort of says, well, I can't trust
Mm.
what this organization says because
Mm.
it doesn't match what it does. So you're better off not having a culture defined in written words that don't actually reflect reality. You're better off not having anything in there. And so we feel like we need these things. What do we need? At the moment, the world seems to need that it needs that it needs loud music in any restaurant or other place because somebody's selling this audio systems. It's gone crazy. Um, and no, we don't actually need that. You don't
Yeah.
need a mission statement and a vision statement if the purpose of having them is just having them. The stuff that makes the biggest difference is the behavior and the words of particularly the visible people, but not only
Mm.
not only the leaders, every in and out every day. By the way, I recommended to you earlier a video about leading like the great conductors
Yes.
by Ite Tagam, which is wonderful, and it's a serious piece. I will now recommend to you an incredible, just I think unbelievably funny music video, which is by, of course, the famous Weird Al Yankovic, who is a lovely human. My daughter met him the other day.
Mm.
Just a wonderful person.
Mm.
He has a song from a few years ago, not that long ago, called Mission Statement. And Mission Statement, which is he parodies other music, right? And this one is from I think it's Crosby, Stills and Nash, "Sweet Judy Blue Eyes," which is one of the great songs of the era 50 some years ago. Oh my God. Every corporate leader needs to see the
Mm.
Weird Al video called Mission Statement, because it just sends up parodies, all the stuff we've been talking about, with the artists writing, doing the graphics as they go. And I play it, for senior management groups, because if we don't know that we're being laughed at and why, we probably should know.
Mm.
And this is real. It's funny, but it's real.
Mm.
Yeah, it just puts all these business cliches out there, and as soon as you see those things going by, you go, "Yeah, that's right. Oh God, we did that.
Oh,
Oh
yes.
my!" So it's holding up a mirror in a funny way to what is some sort of maybe dogma without content, without substance, right? And so, yeah, do you need a mission statement? No, but you do need a purpose. And if the purpose is clearly stated in a mission statement, that's not a bad thing. But if the mission statement is there because corporations need a mission statement, that's a
Yeah.
bad thing.
Yeah. No, that all makes sense. Well, I shall look out for the video and watch it with quite some trepidation, I think.
No, I think you'll enjoy it.
I
Yeah.
mean, it is a complex world, right? And leaders are in ambiguous situations, they're in complicated situations,
Yeah.
and most would say that they're trying to lead ethically. Is there any advice, any generic advice you could give to leaders that want to lead ethically in a complex, ambiguous context?
Sure. I mean, start by just mapping the main pieces of that context, right? Who are your main stakeholders, right? What are the main, you know, short term, medium term, long term purposes and impact, right? So one is purpose, the other is what impact can happen that might
Right.
not be related to the purpose. So just sort of map the space that you're working in and the various, when I say stakeholders, right? It's everybody that my favorite definition of stakeholder, anybody that can ruin my day. So it's,
Okay.
and I borrowed that from
It's a
my
good one.
friends,
It's a good one.
borrowed that from my friends at Prendo Simulations. But I mean, this means thinking broadly, or you might also say anybody whose day I can ruin. Um, it's not just shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, and what have you. It's or bankers. It's also communities.
Mm.
It's regulators. It's competitors. It's my grandchildren. It's their grandchildren. I mean, depending how broadly you want to think. And if you
Mm.
just have that picture, and I would encourage people to just draw it, on a
Mm.
screen or board or paper or whatever, um, so that we remember as we're taking decisions, you know, who it might affect and when, because we're very good at understanding who it's going to affect right now, who's going to be in the conversation, and what the impact can be in the, next 6 months or 2 years, whatever. But what about bigger picture thinking? And so I would encourage people just to sort of map, just a basic stakeholder map is
Mm.
so valuable. And then, look at the interconnections, right? Where are they interlinked? Where are they very divergent? And if I want to initiate some sort of change, which stakeholders would need to be involved? Which stakeholders might I also want to be involved? And which ones care about which other ones? So to be a change agent doesn't mean you do everything. To be a change agent is to make that map and understand which forces are in place where things might move, so that if a particular stakeholder couldn't care less about you, but they care about another stakeholder, maybe making sure that that other stakeholder is, aligned and motivated to move in that direction because of their own purpose and situation, that can have the impact that you personally could not have on that first stakeholder. So these are things that are pretty basic to human behavior and to leadership and business, but we don't typically get trained in that. We don't focus on it because it's often imprecise, and because it's not immediate. And I think in a complex world, things that are not precise and things that are not immediate are the bulk of what we need to think about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thanks for raising that really practical one, Maury. Firstly, I don't like repeating, but I will because it's so good. A stakeholder is anyone who can ruin my day. I think that's a brilliant definition. You remind me of yeah, going back a long way, and the stakeholder management. I mean, that applies at any level of leadership, not just CEOship. And I remember
Normal
years
humans.
ago. Yeah, we're all human, and we all have stakeholders. We could all have our day ruined by someone other than ourselves. And yeah, I'll give a shout out to someone we both know, Dr. Catherine Bailey. You got to know her when you were dean at Cranfield. I got to know her when she was there, and she was my first executive coach, and
Great.
she taught me how to construct and manage stakeholder maps way over a quarter of a century ago,
Great.
and it's
So you're lucky.
and it I was really lucky, and it served me incredibly well, and it's such a practical, useful tool, and that that always makes sense. And sometimes the maps seem to become more complicated, but it's the same principles. Yeah.
But you know who does this? Salespeople do this because they know it makes a difference in their results. It's like, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of leaders, way back 25 years ago, I was part of a next generation of leaders. You're doing a lot to help leaders. You're still a leader, but you're helping many generations of leaders. Any advice that you would give the next generation of leaders? Is there something they should pay more attention to or less attention to than you've seen previous generations of leaders give attention to?
Well, the question is should, right? Who's doing the shoulding? Whom are they
Yeah,
shoulding on? And,
yeah,
you know, so if the question is what will do the most good in the world for the longer term, I'm with that. If it's what will develop my career or make me money, I mean, these are somewhat different questions. I have gotten to the point, as you say, of being more concerned with a bigger picture, longer term, and not so much any one individual. But I think if I'm listening well to some of my students and some of my kids and their friends and my adult kids, that I do believe there is much more concern among the whatever Gen Z or whatever you want to call them and the millennials about maintaining a viable system, in a given country or more importantly in the wider world. And so I want to encourage that, and to encourage learning about other situations, other countries, other points of view, other cultures, before we just descend back into a tribalism which automatically considers those to be the other, and therefore, not important to us, or worse, a threat to us, which is evolutionarily understandable. But we should be beyond that, right? But
mm,
that's the world that we built in the last century or two, and so quite important to recognize the interdependencies, because today given our deep interconnectedness in technology and supply chain and communication and climate and water and food and whatever else, we can't function if we go back to the tribes, because they can't sustain themselves. We might believe we can, particularly the testocracy, but we can't. So I think the interdependencies, whether it's in business or whether it's in the wider world. But see, it turns out that business, if I read the newspapers correctly, aren't we now the most trusted, the most trusted, that's not saying much, but I mean, compared to, government or religion or military or what have you. I mean, the businesses have more public trust than many others, and so it is partly our role, I think, to hold the world together. I don't think small. And then there's another thing I would add, if we're getting to the close here. I mean, one of the things that I just have stressed for a number of years, and maybe you've heard me say this, is about how we think. And so I offer the principle that I came up with some time ago. There are two kinds of people in the world: people who divide the world into two kinds of people, and people who know better. And the challenge is when you find yourself doing this dichotomization, which I gave you a hard time about at the beginning of our conversation. You need to think, wait, is this actually a dichotomy, or, as in most cases, is there a middle space that I really need to think about, and how to kind of operate there? And anybody who has run a division in a global business, or a country in a global network, or been at the head of that, in the center, knows it is not viable for the center to make all the decisions, or for the local to make all the decisions. There is a continually evolving middle space there. And I call that the part that actually can work. I refer to that as the zone of viability. You got to find that and figure out how to work within it. Otherwise, things cannot ever be optimal leadership. So that's my kind of leadership thinking, but not just leadership, but human, that is citizen thinking. How do we figure out how to stop dichotomizing and get to viability? That's the thing.
Yeah, so resisting dichotomy, resisting creating fault lines is pretty important. Yeah.
And whenever you get down to minimal bandwidth, the risk of this gets ridiculously high, right? If all you're getting is a headline or a quote or a 5-second, post, it mitigates against the thinking that gets you to a viable bridging. Much, much harder to do.
Yeah, you got me thinking that the in our lexicon of management, the word division isn't a particularly helpful one.
Yeah, there's a lot of words that are not particularly.
Just as we do get to a close, I started by saying that one of the things you're known for is saying leaders should ask themselves the question, "What don't I know?" Is there anything else that you'd like to leave with business leaders in particular, but all leaders more generally? What's a question you would like them to ask them, to encourage them to ask themselves more regularly?
Yeah. It's not just what do I not know, which is essential, but it's what assumptions do I make, right? Whether cultural or experience, or going back to a previous era where things worked in a certain way. What assumptions am I making or still making that might be wrong, or at the very least, that some of my other stakeholders are not making, and understanding why. So that applies to culture, but it applies to lots of other things, like what's valuable,
Mm.
right? What matters? Or, what is the right level of, uh, box checking, control, what have you. I've told you about my concerns with the UK culture, in which I spent 18 years, and how I was floored by these, in the rail stations and other public places, they have these defibrillators on the wall, right? And so if you're coming off a train and somebody next to you collapses and you run for the defibrillator, you can't open it because it's locked. And you have to ring 999 and hope that the person on the other side answers, believes you when you say somebody's collapsed, can look up and find the right combination, and you can figure out how to key it into. Of course, you open the box and the instructions are right there. And by the time you get there, the person is dead. Because in the UK, forgive me, all my British friends, in the UK, the belief in doing things properly and not, not risking a misstep is more important than saving a life. Now, I know they wouldn't say it that way, but practically speaking, that's what happens. So, there are assumptions that we don't realize we're making.
Mm.
And there's all kinds of, things like that. So we just have to ask ourselves, what are those?
Mm.
And by the way, maybe ask other people close to us to hold up a mirror,
Yeah, yeah.
because we can't figure it all out by ourselves.
It's very difficult to see our own assumptions, yeah, but with the
Yeah.
help of others, yeah, we can, yeah.
Mm.
That's brilliant. Hey, great place to finish, Maury. I think we could have filled
Defibrillators.
a whole, yeah, yeah. Let's, yeah. Maybe it's not, but it's. But let's. I mean, we could have continued for a whole series, I think.
Probably.
But
Probably.
but thanks for joining this wonderful episode. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. There's always so many rich insights there.
And
Thanks for sharing.
I just love the bridging, practice, different experiences, theory. A lot of times people say, "Oh, I want you to do the theory part." And theory, come on. I mean, we can. There's science and there's management, and with apologies to some of my colleagues who believe otherwise, management is not a science, right? Because the conditions are not replicable from one situation to the next, right?
Yeah,
So you can't do these experiments and say, oh, that's going to work. But, we need to bridge the ideas, the theory, the practice, what have you.
right,
Anyway,
right.
great to see you.
Brilliant, brilliant. No, it's fantastic. I love that. Thanks for sharing because you've got the great combination of the practice, of the theory, of the teaching, the leadership. It's been absolutely terrific. Thanks, Maury.
It's a pleasure. And thank you, Hannah. And yeah, let me know what you come up with. And let's book a conversation for the relaxed catch up part.
Yeah, we'll do an unrecorded conversation soon, Maury. Let's
Okay,
let's let's do that really soon. Yeah, but
very cool.
absolutely brilliant to see you today.